It's live. Not yet? Okay.
We're live now, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to everyone. It is May 17th. We have an agenda in front of us for our Economic Development Advisory Group meeting today. And I would like, first of all, to deal with that agenda. Are there any questions or comments or a motion to approve, please? Thank you, Kathy, and seconded by Tracy. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. And then we, declaration of pecuniary interest. Hello, Mr. Furness. Nice to see you. A declaration of pecuniary interest, if any member has an item to declare now, or you can if anything should come up subsequent in the meeting. Are there any declarations now? I see none. Okay. We have our minutes of our last meeting, 20 April 2021. And those minutes, I think, are well done, concise, and accurate. But I ask the members, is there anything, any errors or omissions or comments on the minutes before we proceed with a motion to accept them? Okay, a motion to accept the minutes then is from Barbara and seconded by Tracy. Thank you. And all in favor? That's carried, I believe. Thank you. Okay, so a couple of comments as we move into item 5.1 on the work plan. You saw I sent that email earlier today. I apologize if that caused anyone any confusion. But the last thing I thought that all the members needed was another document to read if it wasn't adding a lot of good new information. So I made a few amendments on the PowerPoint, most notably under the objective, pointing out that the objective is an economic development strategy that is supplemental and supportive of the municipality's vision for growth in its strategic plan and other documents. So that change was made, and also just a few other housekeeping things, such as changing the dates and what have you. So we had that presentation on the 17th. We had discussion following it. And today, what is in front of us is whether we, as the Economic Development Advisory Group, approve of that work plan. And I will leave it there and open it for discussion. Any comments? Or a motion to approve from anyone? Thank you, Michael. Is there a seconder to approve the work plan? Thank you, Barbara. And no further discussion, then all in favor? And I believe I saw everyone's hand up before, so that's carried. Thank you very much. Now, part of that work plan, I have two comments on it before we go to the next section. Part of that work plan is we're in this phase now, this first phase of us getting up to speed. And it's up to speed on a lot of things about the municipality, about various approaches to economic development, but not to draw conclusions quite yet. Not to say, oh, do we have to follow this way? Or I really like that, we only are going to do that. Those discussions will come in due time. It's more of an exposure and a discussion to try to see and develop our understanding of what's possible in economic development. And in doing that, I think that, and I'll raise this later, we'll want to have a discussion after we go through today's presentations on whether, under 5.3, whether we think we should have a meeting in June. Originally, we weren't going to have a meeting in June. We had gone from May to July, and perhaps to continue that discussion and continue the momentum, that may be something that we want to talk about later. Good afternoon, Mayor McQueen.
Hey, sorry about that, Mr. Chair. It never fails. When you go a meeting, somebody comes to the door.
That's right.
Sorry.
No problem. But today, as part of the education part, Councillor Kathy Little is going to present a couple of concepts that are out there and part of, one is very much part of the municipality of Grey Highlands, and the other is a nascent approach to economic development that's been developed over the last few years from an economist who works out of Oxford, I believe, university in the UK, and has a history prior to that in many important aspects of economic development. Both of these presentations are presented today for information. I think at the end of hearing these presentations, we'll have some discussion on if we need more information, what we want to do next, what we want to look at next, and then we'll move forward from there. So, Kathy, I think we're ready for you to talk about the Grey Highlands Lens, and then to talk about Kate Roworth's Doughnut Economics. Over to you, Kathy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, Amanda, I don't need you to share the screen right now, but I think it would be good to be able to look at the document, to be able to see the lens itself at some point, and also the dashboard if that's possible, but not ready right yet. So the Grey Highlands Lens was passed as a bylaw in May of 2017, I believe it was, but it was never implemented. And recently it came back to council, to a committee of the whole, where I basically gave a summary, the same summary that I'm going to present to you today, to council, because many of them were not familiar with the Grey Highlands Lens. And so then it came back to council where it was ratified. And so we're moving forward with the implementation of the lens. So the Grey Highlands Lens is the result of a collaboration between council, the previous council, and students from the University of Guelph under the direction of Dr. Al Lazan from the School of Environmental Design and Rural Economic Development. And the purpose of the project was to develop a framework to help council facilitate strategic and transparent decision-making, promoting sustainability, drawing on public input, and that was relatively easy to use. And council was looking originally at a kind of a triple bottom line checklist, so social, environmental, economic, or financial. Something that would take into consideration the long-range social, environmental, as well as the financial impacts of our decisions on the municipality and our communities. And so there was some compatibility there between the students and Dr. Lazan and council's wishes. And so a subcommittee was struck to dialogue with the students, and they began their work. So there were three basic principles that the students used, which I think are important to understand and really important as we move forward with this, just the ideas behind them. The first is asset-based community development, or ABCD for short, and it promotes sustainable development within communities that builds on their existing strengths or assets. And the idea is to move from deficit-based thinking, not looking at what's wrong with our community or what needs fixing, but looking at what's working for our community and what we can make better and what we can enhance. The second principle was the community capitals framework, and this recognizes different kinds of capitals. So beyond the triple bottom line, so beyond the economic, the financial, and the social, they also include the built environment, political, human capital, and cultural capital, or assets. They're kind of, I use them interchangeably. So it's more of a big picture approach, and the way of doing it this way, it supports interactions between those different capitals instead of just looking at them in isolation. So that's kind of an organizing principle, whereas the asset-based community development is a process principle. And finally, the other principle that they used was using the Huron County Rural Lens as a model for the Grey Highlands Lens, just because it was visually appealing, easy to understand, easy to navigate and use. So that was kind of the basis that the students arrived at. They did significant public engagement. They held some key stakeholder interviews. They had focus groups. They did a survey. They were constantly dialoguing with the subcommittee and updating council and getting feedback from council. So it was a very collaborative effort, and a lot of good community engagement and a lot of positive reception from the community to the idea that council was undertaking this. Can you share the actual lens right now, please? Thank you. So the lens identifies from the community feedback. They narrowed it down. It was difficult, I think, to narrow it down to 11 different asset categories that you can see there. Some are similar to the community capital framework, and others were so strongly articulated by the community that the student group felt that they should also receive, be included, and be recognized in the lens itself. So to the left, there's a little bit of a description of what sort of assets are included under those different categories. And the way that the tool is used is that if you're looking at a policy or a proposal, a project, you would ask the question, how does this proposal affect each asset in a positive way, a negative way, or not at all? And so what you would do is, last time when we were looking at this at the, was it committee? I think, yeah, committee of the whole. We were having some discussion before the lens came up about the fill bylaw, which would govern how fill is brought in, how much fill is brought in, penalties for illegal dumping of fill, that kind of thing. And there are people for it and people against it. And so we were just looking at, well, how would you look at that bylaw in terms of the lens? So just going to the one at the very top, in terms of agriculture, in some respects, this is good because, dumping contaminated fill on good agricultural land is definitely a negative. But if it impacts a farmer's ability to carry out normal agricultural farming practices, then that could be seen, it would be positive to stop contaminated fill from being dumped, but it would be a negative to negatively affect the farmer's ability to conduct their livelihood. So that's just an example, and you would actually place a physical dot or something on that lens on the circle that's positive or negative, and overall you would get a big picture look at overall, is this a positive, this proposal positive or negative to the community. It also identifies, it raises questions, so it's not designed to make a decision for council. What it is designed to do is highlight or uncover some of those areas that may not be apparent, first of all, and are there ways of mitigating those negative impacts? Are there ways of addressing some of those things? So it's a more of a nuanced approach, not necessarily a yay or a nay for a certain proposal, but a way of looking at it more comprehensively. So Amanda, can you go to the dashboard, please? Thank you. So this process would be the same. The interface is a little bit different. You have the same categories. The question, how will this proposal impact? And then the same items are under each of those categories. And then you would just put a check mark in whether it's negative, not applicable, or positive. And so interpreted the same way, council, the last council, some people were preferred the lens, other people preferred the framework. The information that it provides and the discussion that it triggers would be the same. It was more of just a personal preference which of these would be used. So those are the two ways of presenting, I guess, the work that the students did on bringing forward something that would help council make decisions that were transparent and would be looking at the long-term impacts. So finally, as I said, it was passed, so it is in effect, never implemented. So council is going to be, I'm not sure we have a date yet, but council is going to be doing maybe a couple of practice scenarios, hypothetical situations where we would apply the lens and see how it works. The next step after that would be, applying the lens, in a real situation with some item that's either at committee of the whole or at council, and eventually to use it. One key feature I don't think I mentioned was that it is a living document. It's meant to evolve, it's meant to change, it's meant to grow, and it's meant to engage the community and have community input as we go through this. So the fact that it was presented, almost 5 years ago, I guess 4 years ago, and not been implemented yet, there may be some, that's a long time really, and there may be already some significant changes that could be made. But I think it's important that we experience it, put it into practice, and just see how it works, and that will help identify if there are improvements to be made. So that's about all I have to say on the lens, but I'm happy to take any questions, or the mayor also, was part of that council and a fan. So, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Barbara, you have a question for Kathy.
Yes, a couple actually. Just what was the barrier to rolling it out previously? Was there a reason why it was held back, or?
It's almost a reality of how council and operations work. So what happened was, I think immediately after, or it might even be before we passed the bylaw, our CAO left. Then we had staff doing other responsibilities while we were absent a CAO. A new CAO came in and there were staffing changes. So there was a lot of disruption over that period of time.
Okay. So it wasn't we tried it and there was any? No. Okay.
It just, I always think it never seemed like the right time because there were always more pressing, urgencies.
Yeah.
But then when is the right time to do something like this, And I think if actually implemented it, it would be very useful to us in the present. So
I think I like the framework. I think the framework is really good, almost like for consideration sets and impact assessments. I think it gives a really great viewpoint. I'm just wondering, is there anything in it that impacts the weighting of each element, or how it links into kind of the end vision? That was the one thing that I wasn't quite sure how that connected. So when we look at the consideration set, yes, absolutely, it kind of gives us where it's going to touch everything. But if we, for example, had a requirement that we wanted to really focus on the agricultural area, how would that reflect in the weighting to help drive those types of decisions? That's the only thing I didn't quite see in there, but I thought the framework was really good.
So through the chair, that was one of the considerations, because the students actually were developing kind of a weighting system. And it was, I guess, the decision, maybe the recommendation of the subcommittee and the feedback from council was that at that point we didn't want to do that part of it, but just use
Okay.
it more as a tool for having broader discussions and making sure that we brought in. I think a lot of the time, some decisions come back to the financial benefit that's going to come to the municipality without full consideration of some of the other
Mhm.
impacts, environmental and social. So this was just a way of expanding that discussion, but there's nothing to say that moving forward, and you'll see that one of the recommendations or one of the next steps was talking about staff implementing this and using it. And that's a whole different level of engagement, I think, and may warrant some kind of weighting at that point. You
Mhm.
know that if it was going to be included, and the long range vision that you're talking about. I had some good thoughts integrating the our own strategic plan and those five areas that are in the strategic plan and how they fit with the lens. So I don't know if
Okay.
Michelle, you wanted to, or sorry, through through the chair, but I know Michelle had some thoughts on this as well.
Great. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions, Michelle?
Yes, thank you, if I may. Yeah, I just wanted to add, and Kathy and I have had a lot of conversations about this. I really like the approach of the lens, but I do think, and I think, Barbara, it goes back a little bit to your point, that the municipality also has a strategic plan. So where do those things fit into the lens, and how do we assess those? And I think it's, I don't have anything brilliant to say other than I think it's really important that we connect those two documents, because the lens, in my mind, is more an approach to decision making and evaluation, whereas the strategic plan is a directional document of the municipality at this point. So I think we really need to make sure that somehow we're aligning those. And if you look at the 5 pillars of the strategic plan, actually they align quite closely with some of the criteria around the lens. So Barbara, I concur with you that this can't be, I don't think, done in that isolation. And I think we need to have this more holistic approach on how all the pieces fit in the puzzle.
Thanks, Michelle. Any other comments or questions at this point? Yes, Paul.
There, coming off mute. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, there's other guiding documents that also form some of your decision making, and that's your official plan and your zoning document as well, which is your more or less your core parts, which you review over a period of every 5 to 10 years. You say every 5 years, but it ends up being every 10 years by the time you get to it. But certainly those are also guiding documents, along with the provincial policy and other levels of planning, like for example, like the Niagara Escarpment plan, and you have other plans that also are layered in there as well. So there's certainly a lot of guidance material for us as the decision makers, along with the political side. And but I would agree that, as Michelle said, it's sort of something that gives you a bit of a guide of sort of that sobering thought of analyzing it, and that's part of analyzing it. You figure, it sort of gives you that, I think, tool in the sense of making you think about all the parts, right? And I think that's what the lens is really for. And I know when it was developed in Huron County, I'm trying to think he's been the warden, Jim. I'm trying to think of his name. He was a guy that presented it at the Roma conference back, I think, 2016. And part of it was also a guidance around with regards to the agricultural side, because Huron County has a larger agricultural side, but they do have a mix of seasonal and along the shoreline of Lake Huron as well. So it was sort of, and I think that's where Kathy, picked up on it. And I know I talked to him at different times as well on that. So it's, if it helps you see the stars when you're steering the ship, that's a good thing, right, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely. And to pick up one point that you alluded to, Paul, and that is that I think the lens, one of its strengths is it provokes people to think around the whole circle instead of rush to a conclusion. And some of those dimensions may have to be modernized. Climate change isn't on there, but natural environment is, and also agriculture may be different if you're looking at the C4s, the commercial class 4 that are on a lot of Mennonite farms, and so there's variability and flexibility to Kathy's comment about it being a living document, but it's the provocateur that really forces people to think about. Kathy, I thank you for the overview. I'll be interested to see how council unfolds its practice sessions and discovers how best to implement it. I think for our group at this point, it's a piece of information. As I said before, as we unfold over the next coming months, we'll just see how it may fit into our position at some point in time. So thank you. Now it's time for a donut.
I wish I had some real donuts to share, virtually share. So this is a bit of a new experiment for me, sharing my screen, and I'm not even sure I can run through the PowerPoint the way it's supposed to be. I might just be able to go slide to slide, but we'll try this anyway. So I'm going to go share screen. Oh shoot, where did it go?
You got to find the screen.
There it is. Can you see that slide?
No, not yet. You have to hit share, bottom right, the red button, after you identify the screen. And that's all I know. And then aside from calling in Amanda to give you better instructions. Oh, there you go.
Okay, great. So this was a lucky coincidence that, first of all, I'm just an enthusiast when it comes to donut economics. I can't claim any sort of credentials except curiosity. But I have talked to various people about the donut economy, and I don't often find anyone who knows what I'm talking about. So my name has become associated with the donut economy. And I was approached about giving for a climate group. And it's actually coming up this Thursday evening. And so I just thought it was a happy coincidence that this was relevant to our work plan, that we were going to be talking about the donut economy. And so you are special preview audience. And I'll get started. This would be kind of the way that I approach it with this group, which is just made up of anybody who wants to attend. It's a very kind of ad hoc group. So what does the donut have to do with climate change? The topic of this whole evening is paradigm shift, how to talk with your neighbors about climate change. And so, can you still see my screen? Barbara, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can still see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. So the answer to what this has to do with climate change is it's up to us. And this presentation will start with a quick overview of what the donut economy framework is and why use it, and then look at some examples of where and how the donut economy is being implemented. So donut economics represents a paradigm shift in the way we think about economics in the 21st century. Simply put, the goal is to meet the needs of all people within the means of the planet. It was developed, as Jim said, by the British economist Kate Raworth in 2012, And her book that you can see here was published in 2017. And since that time, the donut economy concept has spread around the world and has been adopted by neighborhoods, cities, and regions, and even one country, Costa Rica, has adopted the donut.
Excuse me, Kathy.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but your slides aren't flipping.
Oh,
So we're still seeing the first slide.
okay. I think, Amanda, we better go with you. If you could, the PDF that I sent you just around 4 o'clock or so.
Yep, I can pull that up. If you stop
Yeah.
sharing,
Uh,
top of your screen, it should be.
yeah, right. Okay.
During this commercial break, I'll just point out that when I take my image off, it's because my internet's going a little wonky on me, and I don't want to lose all of you. So I'm here. I'm just listening, and I'll use it judiciously.
I should say at this point too that Jim actually teaches a course on economics and geography, and was teaching the donut economics to his class this year. So if you have any academic type questions, you can direct them to Jim. Next slide, Amanda, please. So the donut comprises 2 concentric circles, shown here in dark green. The inner circle is the social foundation, or the minimum standards of human well-being. The outer circle represents the ecological ceiling, or the planetary boundaries of Earth's life-supporting systems. And between those 2 green circles lies the ecologically safe and socially just space in which all humanity has the chance to thrive. Next slide, please. So the dimensions of the donut, the 12 dimensions of the social foundation are derived from the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the dimensions of the ecological ceiling are the 9 planetary boundaries defined by Earth system scientists in a 2015 paper entitled Planetary Boundaries Guiding Human Development on a Changing Planet by Stefan et al. Next slide, please. So on a global scale, what does the donut look like? Using the metrics of the social foundation and the planetary boundaries. And it reflects the fact that billions of people around the world still cannot meet their most essential needs, while humanity has already overshot multiple planetary boundaries. Slide, please. Now, I know you can't read this, but I did want to show you a terrific website from the University of Leeds. It's interactive. And this part of it is called A Good Life for All Within Planetary Boundaries, and it allows you to compare any 2 countries. And so here I just took a screenshot of the G20 nations on the left and Rwanda on the right. So-called developed countries invariably overshoot most planetary boundaries while meeting most basic human needs. And typically the exact opposite is the case for so-called developing countries like Rwanda here. And Kate Rayworth says that we're all developing countries until we can find that sweet spot and live within our means. Next slide, please. So what are the advantages of the donut model? Why would we use this? And first of all, complexity is characterized by unpredictability, and complex systems are sometimes described as wholes that are more than the sum of their parts. The donut model enables us to visualize and begin to grasp the multiple social and ecological existential challenges we're facing, and to stop regarding them in isolation and start understanding them as interconnected. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, no, back again. Yeah, usually these, on my slideshow, these come up as sort of individual bullets. Next is collaboration. The holistic view of complex challenges demands multiple perspectives, actually demands collaboration where all stakeholders are valued and heard. Collaboration nurtures innovation. With new ways of seeing come new ways of being with one another and new ways of acting together. Adaptation is one of the beauties of the donut. Downscaling is happening, it's working, and knowledge sharing is one of the donut economy's basic principles of practice. Context. We each approach this work from our own unique individual and collective perspectives, geographically, socioeconomically, environmentally, and historically. All those who embrace the donut economy framework are not only motivated but supported by past efforts, past successes, ongoing initiatives, and these days spurred by the real, very real immediate impacts of COVID-19. And lastly, hope. The donut economy provides the map and compass. There are cities already pioneering the way, and we here and now can start by envisioning the future we need. Next slide, please. So how do we actually downscale the donut? In April 2020, Amsterdam was the first city to adopt the donut economy model. Next slide. Amsterdam joined the Thriving Cities Initiative, a collaboration between C40, the Circle Economy, and the Donut Economics Action Lab. This initiative provides a starting point for holistic thinking to foster an economic recovery in response to COVID that not only secures lives and livelihoods, but also builds resilient communities in ecologically safe and socially just cities. Creating City Portraits, the playbook, is based on the experience of pilot cities, and the methodology is open to anyone interested in downscaling the donut to their city or place. Next slide. So the donut can be turned into a city-scale tool by asking the very 21st century question posed here. How can this place be a home to thriving people in a thriving place while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? It's a question that invites every city to start exploring what it would mean to thrive within the donut, given that city's location, context, culture, and global connections, and the result being the city portrait. Next, please. So the four parts of that question transform into the four interconnected lenses, each one highlighting a different aspect of what it means to be a thriving city. So along the top, you have the local social, the local ecological, and along the bottom, the global social. For example, what would it mean for this city to respect the well-being of people worldwide? The global ecological. What would it mean for this city to respect the health of the whole planet? Each lens can be investigated in many different ways depending on local factors. And the next few slides are going to look a little bit more closely at the process. Thanks, Amanda. So in the Amsterdam model, and just looking at the local social lens, the question is, what would it mean for the people of Amsterdam to thrive? And who better to ask than the people of Amsterdam themselves to provide the answers based on their own experiences? Next, please. So at the core of the Amsterdam community engagement process, there were 5 community forums, 4 of them related to each one of these themes: Healthy Amsterdam, Connected Amsterdam, Empowered Amsterdam, and Enabled Amsterdam. And then there was another additional one. And these subdimensions, these come with certain subdimensions, which come right out of the city portrait methodology. Next slide, please. So going back to our first social local, Healthy Amsterdam comprises health, housing, water, and food. Connected Amsterdam, connectivity, community, mobility, and culture. Empowered Amsterdam embodies peace and justice, social equity, political voice, equality and diversity. And lastly, Enabled Amsterdam, jobs, income, education, and energy. Next slide. So focusing on Healthy Amsterdam, you can see in this slide that there are city targets and city snapshots for each subdimension. And these are drawn from the city of Amsterdam's existing targets as the most current measures of Amsterdam residents' well-being. Next slide. So the Amsterdam model for the most effective process and results The report coming out of this exercise recommends that any team looking to create their own city portrait work collaboratively and involve researchers, city staff, civic organizations, and community networks. Next slide. And I did mention there was a fifth forum, and that was related to the local ecological lens, and it's organized around the themes of water, air, and land. Amsterdam was the first city to adopt the doughnut, but there are others, and the list keeps growing, and each city response is unique. So we'll take a look at a few of those. Next slide, please. Regen Melbourne is the driving force behind this doughnut as a network of individuals and organizations exploring a regenerative future for the city of Melbourne. And in October 2020, Regen Melbourne started exploring the doughnut economy using the city portrait methodology. Working holistically across the dynamic complexity of Melbourne's economic, ecological, and social systems was seen as the only way to ensure long-term safety, security, and justice. Next slide. And this report towards a regenerative Melbourne just came out last month, and I would say it's a must read for anyone who's interested in just the basics of the doughnut economics. And it also includes a detailed how-to guide. It's really, really well done. Next slide. So Nanaimo, in December 2020, Nanaimo became the first Canadian city to pioneer the doughnut. The Nanaimo city portrait is self-described as a holistic snapshot of the city and its impact on both community and ecological well-being at both the local and global scale. And their model builds on over 2 decades of sustainability initiatives, including the very recent community engagement initiative called Reimagine Nanaimo. And the guiding principles from that include acknowledging and addressing climate change and also truth and reconciliation, and these are integrated into the city portrait. This draft version of the Nanaimo model is shared here with the permission of Nanaimo Mayor Leonard Krogh, and you can see that the truth and reconciliation circle is at the very heart of their doughnut. Next slide, please. Cornwall in the UK has followed a similar methodology, but the application of the doughnut model is a little different. And shown here is the Cornwall decision-making wheel being applied in this instance to a specific proposal, which is to consider a hiking and biking trail infrastructure project. So there are the outer circle environmental indicators, the inner circle social indicators, and the safe space between the two mirror the traditional doughnut. But the colors on this doughnut reflect the potential impact that this project might have on these different dimensions. So the light green is having a long-lasting positive effect. The blue-green is short-term positive benefit. The gray is no known impact. Yellow, short-term negative impact. And red would be long-term negative impact. And in Cornwall, staff and council both use this tool for policy development and project assessment. The wheel has been shared freely with other municipalities, and currently Cornwall is working on developing version 2, which will be a digitized and streamlined version. Next slide, please. So there are so many resources for doughnut economics out there, most of them online. Obviously, the first one would be Kate Raworth's book, Doughnut Economics. It's very engaging, easy to read, easy to understand without dumbing things down too much, and I highly recommend that. Kate Raworth has her own website with videos and podcasts on that, and you can find there her 60-minute TED Talk that she gave in 2018, which is also a great resource. Another wonderful resource is the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, which is Creative Commons licensed. It's being updated all the time. There are projects and ideas and tools and images, and everything's coming in from all different resources around the world. And it's just a wonderful resource and free to use as long as you acknowledge the source. And then the website that I used previously was A Good Life for All Within Planetary Boundaries. And I encourage you to take a look at that and just explore. I did have some other slides, and I just thought the presentation was going to be way too long if I included those, but I encourage you to take a look. And finally, the reports that I mentioned, and there are others, but I really like these two. Amsterdam was the first, and it's only about 12 pages long. And the Melbourne one is fantastic, and it just came out last month. So those are the resources, but there are lots. Next slide, please. So we have come full circle, so to speak, and back to the overarching question: how can Grey Bruce be a home to thriving people in a thriving place while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? Kate Rayworth says, a lot comes down to communication, changing minds one at a time. It seems like it could take forever to change paradigms, she says, but in an individual, it can happen in the blink of an eye. And so that ends my presentation, and I thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, ask Jim.
I'll be contacting you to book you as a guest lecturer for next year. Thank you very much, Kathy. That was very informative and very comprehensive in covering off all the aspects of donut economics quickly. Two comments, and then I'll open it up for questions. First of all, I think the biggest strength that is surfacing with the whole approach is its scalability. Because when you first look at it, you get this overwhelming sense that it's a global perspective. And what we're seeing, or what we have seen with several cities, starting with Amsterdam, is this translation of the approach to smaller scale, different units. I have no reason to believe that can't be done to a rural municipality as well, because of the scalability of all of the dimensions and the ability of the key thing in defining them is listening to people. You know, sort of like having visioning sessions for Beaver Valley and Markdale. Oh, that's already being done.
Yeah.
And so it's, I think that there's a lot of prospect there. When you look at the, Roworth also talks about 6 different principles of that come up there about, and as you read into more of the detail about the regenerative economy and what have you, those individually are scalable. Yeah. So the whole model is, and the elements are, and that to me is going to be one of the strongest points. And the last comment I'll make is I really encourage, if you have the opportunity, to go look at the TED Talk on YouTube. And it's there's a short version and a longer version, but to be exposed to that, to hear the arguments made firsthand is quite informative. So it's a good approach. Any comments or questions or perspectives on donuts? And we shouldn't be, see, it's like dinner time and we're talking donuts. Barbara.
Thank you. I had never heard of this before myself, so personally, thank you for sharing that. And I did go and watch the TED Talk, and I found it actually quite fascinating. And I think it, you know, having, you know, so many years in business where it's very much bottom line, it's great to kind of flip it and really look at it from more of a socialist view. And I think as I think about the community overall that I want to live in, and that, you know, one of the reasons why I joined this council was to be able to get more towards that side. So thank you very much for sharing that. I think it was really good, and I'm definitely going to take a look at some of these other pieces that you've shared with us.
It has a, oh, go ahead, Kathy.
I just wanted to respond to Barbara that with the Nanaimo initiative, it seems to be coming from the business community that they wanted to do this, which was interesting. And then through a council member brought it to council. And that's kind of, you know, I think in each place it seems to start in a different way. But I thought it was interesting that the business community saw it as a real advantage that Nanaimo would be the first Canadian city, and they would be like at the forefront, and they wanted to be known for that. So just to your point.
The observation I was going to make, it has a very social element to it, but a lot of the politics sometimes gets a little confused, I believe, and so one of the questions that we explored in the course that I just was involved with was whether this model supported or challenged a capitalistic approach to running business. And we had 90 students respond to that on a midterm exam. And it was all over the map, but we ended up having a wonderful discussion that it might challenge a few conventions, but it doesn't undermine a capitalistic approach to business operations at all. It just it's a bit of a challenge to adapt to it. So it's an interesting proposition. Tracy, Michael, any comments or observations? It's all.
No, I don't. I found it very interesting. I think I'll have to go back and do some more research, and I didn't get a chance to look at the video, but I will do that.
Right. Okay, great.
I had a high level understanding of doughnut economics, but I liked the detail of the presentation. I liked her TED Talk as well. She's very passionate about it, like that.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, with the different elements, because I think in the framework, we talk about different types of economic development. So there's the ecological and the social enterprise. And I do think it kind of encompasses bits and pieces of all of it. So I liked that about it as well.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. How about you, Paul? Any comments or observations at this point? You're on mute.
Somebody has to be on mute to start with, right? And certainly, I haven't drove in it as deep maybe as others, but I certainly, first thing I say, is there a better word than a donut? I just think, is there a different? I was gonna Google up, see if there's a better word or a different word than donut. I understand the idea how it comes about, because you've got your upper and lower, and you got your in between.
One of those round life preservers you have on the Chichimon,
Yeah, not a car tire either, right? But I don't know. It's just that I just look at it. It's sort of, I guess it comes across as just a basic idea as a donut, but I can see how you have the ceiling and where that comes from. I would say probably there's from climate change and all those aspects around the outer side is changing that outer part of that donut, no doubt. And over the transformation of the next 20 years. I always remember back when I was in Sunday school, which is a long time ago, and my Sunday school teacher would say, the transformation of our society in the last 25 years is greater than the last 100. And you look forward, as that keeps changing, technology keeps changing, other things keep changing. So we do live in a changing world of a lot of different dynamics of how things are. When I was looking at this, I was thinking back, Al Gore. Remember he came out, I'm trying to think when that was, when he had those about the climate change.
It was shortly after the election was stolen from him. It was
that's right. But he did capture quite an audience on his discussion. I think it was in the early days of climate change and bringing people's awareness to that part. So there's a lot of mechanisms that led up to this point, right?
Yeah, the inconvenient truth.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Steve, any comments? Has Grey County Council adopted this approach to anything?
Yeah, no, they haven't. Maybe the committee should look at it. I should present it to, pass it along to our advisory committee. They'd have to meet first. I don't think we've met in a long time. It's very interesting. I mean, I think, you know, I've always, the view is you got to create the pie, figure out how you distribute it in a real basic way. Having lens and I'm not sure the donut conjures up different images, but I understand what the concept is. So yeah, it's good. It's, you know, the challenge is always how do we then bring it all right down to what we do in an action plan? But you have to start with the big thinking. So
yeah,
it's good.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Paul?
Just, I would say Grey County has started. I mean, we started our task force on affordable, attainable housing last year, and we had some recommendations come out toward our budget of now putting some money aside to address that part of, and I think that would be one part of your donut in the sense of your, you know, of that sector of your society. So I think, you know, there has been some changes there, and I think we all, I know we developed a climate change task force, and so as the county. So, you know, there's little parts that is, you know, so, you know, it sometimes takes a little while to turn the big ship around, but, you know, it's aspects. Yep. So I would say that county council has, and I will say that was something when I was warden, I introduced both those climate change and the attainable house task force as well at that time.
Right. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Michelle, do you have any insights to offer us on the on donut or the lens?
No, I have no insights. I think my comments on the lens were said earlier, and I do think, you know, I'm all about that. We've got to look at all of these tools as part of the bigger piece. Like it's like a great big puzzle, and there's all of these disparate pieces. And if we don't sort of take them all to consideration, we're doing things piecemeal. And I like the idea of looking at stuff, and I know it's an overused word, but holistically, I think it's really critical. And yeah, that's all I've got to say.
Thanks, Michelle. I just think that wouldn't it be interesting if the two visioning exercises that are now underway, Beaver Valley and Markdale, if they could somehow benefit from having a similar superstructure, similar framework to them, that when the results come out, they're I'm not saying comparative, but at least when you look at what Melbourne's done and what Amsterdam's done and Nanaimo's done, and they got the priority areas, the 4 priority areas, it'd be nice if the visioning could comment on areas that are common. You know, what did the visioning tell you about health in Markdale, in Beaver Valley? What did it tell you about the ecological approach in Markdale and Beaver Valley? You know, those types of common superstructure items that sort of link to this approach, or even it's also a link to the lens as well. But just to have a commonality there of important elements to where the municipality has said it wants to go in its strategic plan and other documents. Paul?
Well, I think on the health side, Jim, we've been talking more about the health campus in Markdale and with the CHC, the new hospital, expanding long-term care. Hopefully the current Grey Gables can be assisted living. So, I mean, that's a part of our sector that's affecting a great part of in the CHC, as you know, with the CHC and being on there, how that has greatly improved access and to a lot of different programs in our area. So I would say that's one of those highlights that I think, you know, part of that we're hitting on, right?
Yep, no, exactly. There are, I mean, there's a lot of elements on our table, and over the next several months, we will be setting that table on what are the important pieces and which ones should be within reach and which ones do we want to have there in case we need to use them. So there are a lot of actual pragmatic projects, and there's a lot of conceptual advice that we're getting from the discussion tonight and other discussions as we go ahead.
Just one.
I'm going to ask.
Just one-
Sorry.
Just
Sure,
one other
Paul.
thing. Just one other thing, Jim. Just on long-term care and I don't want to get into the heavy discussion, but I think from what they're saying in that report that you came out, aging in place and that whole aspect, and I know you have a lot of health care background in your a lot of miles there, but I think there's going to be a bit of a change on taking care of our seniors and our aging in place. So there just might be a little change, right? Just because of the last few years of what's come out. So we're always adapting. We're always, it's fluid, right?
Yes, and I'm not going anywhere. Michelle.
I was just going to say that related to the visioning and using tools like this, I do think both of them would be benefit. I think the challenge is now, and I think with any of this, some of this stuff we're into already. There are time things on this. So I think even having this approach accepted early on, I think as Councillor Little said, if we can start to test it on some smaller things, and I think the success of any of these approaches to assessment and looking at various tools is when they become intrinsic to your thinking and embedded, that they don't become a forced matrix all the time, but it is just a philosophy on how you approach things. And I think that's, if I could say, where would I like us ideally to be? I would like it when we all think with that approach. And it doesn't have to be a grid that we necessarily have to bring up on a screen to assess.
Right. Exactly. Krista, do you have any comments you'd like to share at this time?
No, nothing beyond. I think it's been a fantastic discussion, and I concur with what's been said before, that I think it's an important tool to consider, and we keep it in the kind of a front of mind as we're making decisions.
Okay, thank you very much. Kathy.
I think one of the really important elements of the lens, the donut, and which really impressed me through the Markdale visioning sessions and the Beaver Valley visioning sessions was the level of community engagement, the variety of perspectives. I was just very excited to see the response, and this is the kind of, it's really democratic. I think it's like democracy at work if we're actually listening to what people are saying. But to have those conversations, those wider conversations with lots of people present, and not lots of times we have big conversations and there's animosity, but when we're working together towards some common purpose, I just think it's very exciting, and I look forward to continuing those kinds of conversations with the community.
Thank you. That's and I think that's a very valid point. I mean, I've there has been a long history of contentious issues where even before the first discussion starts, half of the room is on one side and the other half's on the other side, as opposed to approaching it and trying to find, first of all, to listen, and not just hear, but to listen, and then to look for ways forward. It's a valuable point. Any other questions or comments right now? This may seep into us like it may take a while to steep before we get other questions or comments. just like a good
comment,
cup of
yeah.
tea.
Just a comment
Yes.
there. I mean, the other balancing side of this is also the ability to have a good job, the ability to raise a family, ability to have a roof over your house, over your head, of all that, a roundabout way, right? It's about
Yeah.
that balance of life and moving forward through that part. And we always got to keep that in mind it all works well until you're not working or you don't have a job or you're, that type of thing. So we have to get that plugged in there as well, right? So
Yep. And part of what is raised with donut economics is to make sure that everyone has a roof over their head and a job and income and be able to sustain themselves to some degree. And so it's more of there is that social or communal side as well. And I mean, that's part of the overall model. Not in a socialistic or socialism perspective, but in a more I'll use the word communal perspective. And it's a balance. You're correct, no doubt. What I'm going to suggest is two things. One is I think our next meeting, there's a couple of other topics we may want to talk about. One of them is social enterprise. The other may be a more traditional approach to, or conventional, I should use the word, approach to economic development that is being carried out by a lot of other municipal groups like ours. And also that would also include understanding what some of the legislation says and what the legislation may allow and not allow around economic development. And I think that it's just part of the overall education of ourselves and this group as a whole as we move forward. Now, I don't know enough about the background of the other community members, Barbara, Michael, and Tracy, to formally ask this question. But is there anything that you would like to or feel compelled to contribute as in the next stage of our discussions around economic development concepts or models? And I'm not saying that to put you on the spot, but I'm just sort of opening up the door, a little crack in the door, because that's where the light gets in. My apologies to Leonard Cohen. Barbara.
So I don't have anything specific that I would necessarily share. I think it's more of an approach and an evaluation framework from my experience on what I'm kind of seeing as I'm going through. I'm very eager to see the visioning exercises and the outputs of that. I'm not sure what the timing is on getting those, because I think that's where it kind of will start to connect a little bit more of the dots for me on how do we then take that. And I think Steve was saying earlier, how do we take all this information and put it into action kind of thing. Yep. So I think from my perspective, not necessarily anything specific to put on the agenda. I think if there is something legislative, like you said, that we should be aware of, I think that's something I probably have knowledge gaps in. So if there's an opportunity to put that on the table or to share that I can read up on it, it's probably an area that I need some education.
Okay, good. Tracy? Oh, sorry.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, Michael.
I would say that I think the only value that I could add is based on my personal career experience at VRL. We do a lot of work with the Center for Social Innovation, and so they have shared with us a lot of examples of social enterprise in what they see in their community. So I may be able to share some examples there. But other than that, I'm still learning. So, and I like the education part. I found the vision sessions quite both entertaining and informative, and really learned a lot about what people are passionate about. So I'm looking forward to the legislation piece because I do deal a lot with government relations too. So happy to share on the social enterprise side if you would like a few minutes from me.
I think that would be terrific. And you and I can maybe connect on email the next couple of days to figure out exactly what that might look like. Okay, great. Michael.
Yeah, nothing to add at this time, I would say. Similar to Tracy and Barbara, really looking forward to the upcoming phases, both from an educational standpoint, but also providing value in the visioning process.
Right.
As we go along and sort of connect the dots. I'm interested in that.
Terrific. Terrific. That's great. And I think as has been expressed, that's exactly the right position for us to all be in, is to, we're collecting items and we'll connect the dots as things unfold. Now, I mentioned earlier on about wait, first of all, I have to check. Amanda, do I have to do anything like receive Kathy's reports or anything administrative that I've overlooked?
Yes, we need a motion to receive for information, please.
Okay, and who would like to make that motion, please? That we receive Kathy's reports. Thank you, Tracy, and seconded by, thank you, Barbara. All in favor? Thank you. Okay. Don't want to miss anything. Amanda will remind me. That's for sure. Thank goodness she does. So I mentioned before the possibility of having a meeting in June. We originally weren't going to. It'd be June, I think it's the 15th, would be the third Tuesday. And any comments on that? Do you think we should, I mean, our pace isn't breakneck, but it's consistent. And should we keep that consistency up? Any comments on that, Tracy?
My answer is yes. I think that we're in momentum of learning and educating ourselves. And I think if we stop now, we might lose some of that, what we've retained so far. So my vote is yes, please.
Okay.
So
Paul, yes?
what date was that again, Jim?
June 15.
Okay, I have a committee of adjustment at 5 o'clock. The committee of adjustment.
Okay. Can you adjust that committee?
We try, but we've been working at that forever.
Okay.
The 22nd from 5 on is fine, but maybe Amanda can speak to that.
Okay. Amanda, what do you suggest?
There would be a conflict on the 15th because we only have one YouTube account to stream live feeds. And so Committee of Adjustment would get that. So we could do another Monday like we've done today, or we could push it to the next Tuesday, which would be the 22nd, or whatever would be the wish of the committee.
How is the, Paul, I think you'll probably be going to the CHC AGM on the 22nd.
Oh, am I? Okay.
I'm only, I would, how about the 14th then? We'll move it. Is that date okay? The Monday? Amanda?
That works for the municipality, yeah.
Okay. 14th of June?
Could we actually have a motion for that? Because in it, we passed a motion earlier saying that we weren't going to have a meeting in June.
We can. I'm just making sure I'm getting all the heads nodding first, and then and then we'll have the motion.
Thank you.
Okay. So June 14th, same time. I think that's moved by Kathy and seconded by Michael. All in favor? Done. June 14th, 5 p.m. Thank you. Any other comments or questions under for any of the members of the committee? Paul.
Just any thought of having conversation or policy around demographics? The reason I raise that is probably everybody is on here is familiar with the boom bust and echo that came out in '97, and it talked about demographics, and it talked about that. And the reason I raise that is demographics is different. For an example, the millennials have a whole different thought process or doing, than, the baby boomers and all that kind of stuff. And it does have different dynamics because, well, I don't need to explain it because each sector has a different thought process and a different thinking, right? More holidays, more time off, more going travel the world. Where all us baby boomers, we just worked all the time, right? That's all we do, right? So I shouldn't say that, but you know what I mean? There's a different thought process for those demographics. And I just wondered if that's something that you have dealt with or talked about, because when you're planning or when you're putting things together, I guess that's why everybody has a different approach to the lens, because they come at from a different perspective, but then from a different generational look as well. And it could be more high level in the sense of, but is there any papers out there? Is there any discussion points on that demographics in the sense? I just refer back to that book, Boom, Bust, and Echo, because it talked about the baby boomers and the Echo kids and stuff like that, right? So, and how that moved economics, right?
Next to Richard Florida, David Foote is my second least favorite author.
Alrighty.
And Steve Furness is probably will recognize my comments about Richard Florida, but the topic is very important, and I think it's something that we have to be aware of because and somehow build. I mean, the biggest change we're seeing in demographics in Grey Highlands right now, of course, is dealing with the large population of Mennonite agriculture and commercial industrial activity, and that is something that I think we have to reflect on. That's a demographic reality that at some point in time, economic development strategy has to be aware of how to support and respond and provide and provoke and all those words to those demographic shifts. I also think that in the last year and a half, we've probably are witnessing a demographic shift in terms of people who are now living up here full time. Not just Barbara, but there's been a significant shift, as you know, and as the houses get built, that will also be a different change as well. So we have to look at the people side, and understanding the demographics and the demographic trends are very important in doing that. The only reason I don't like Mr. Foote is he tended to overgeneralize.
And I only use that as an example of something that was thought provoking. I think it certainly will work because it made you think. It provoked your thinking, right? Just one last comment is also the parts around the last 15 months on just again on the demographics and the price of housing, and just the 30% increase that has a drastic effect on the young, on that millennial as well, that millennial age group and stuff like everybody you talk to is like, you just can't believe it. And I don't want to get into that discussion, but it is the talk of the water cooler right now is how can young people and all that stuff, which again, your balance of your community is having a balance of all different demographics, right? So I'm going to leave it at that, but I just think it's something.
But to that point, one of the major discussions that came out of the Markdale visioning was attainable housing in downtown Markdale, right? Yep. In a mixed use environment. And so I think some of those messages are being picked up quite clearly.
Well, Jim, Grey Highlands is a forward-thinking people. We're always ahead of the curve, right? So.
What curve? We're on a straightaway now.
Well, there you go. Hey, the donut has a curve. The donut has a curve. There you go.
Terrific. Any other closing comments or observations from
Yeah,
anyone
Mr.
on the committee?
Mr. Chair, if I may, it's Michelle.
Oh,
Um,
hello. Your avatar is there. Yes.
Yeah, but I put my hand up, but it's not sure. So I just wanted to say in regards to demographics, so we have some stuff on our website. We subscribe and we get some of those indicators. They're older now. We rely on, the data that's available. But I do believe we have a member of our committee who has a strong connection to environics. And I think as we're looking around information and trending, there is very little data that we've been able to secure. I mean, there's lots of articles, but around trends and post-COVID trends. And certainly, what the mayor has been speaking about, out migration and, changing demographics of the municipality, increased housing prices. We are not the only municipality in Ontario. And Michael, I was thinking that maybe I could put you on the spot, but as we're educating ourselves, maybe not today, but maybe for a future meeting, there might be some information that you could impart upon this committee related to trends that you're seeing through your area of expertise.
Yeah, I can take that away. That's fine. Happy to do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Terrific. Well, I think that's it for another meeting, folks. Thank you very much, Kathy. Particularly thank you for your presentation, and thank everyone for the discussion that followed there. We'll meet on June 14th. And we will, I will be in touch with Tracy to talk about involvement in presenting for the next meeting. And as the agenda gets developed, I may reach out to some others to contribute as well. So that's, I guess that's it. If there's no further comment or question from anyone.
Move to adjourn.
I move to adjourn and off to the donut shop.
I think I'm gonna have a steak.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.